The Great Seer Nostradamus Tells All by William P. Lazarus. Chapter 4, Episode 1. Hildegard, Ernest said in a low voice. Nostradamus just shrugged, not yet aware of the connotation of that dreadful name. Fear not, lad, he does not know us, Ernest said. I espied him when he was just beginning to make a name for himself. That was long ago and far away, and he many pounds thinner. The uncowled monk ungainly settled onto the soft grass and leaned back against an old, fallen statue of a young maiden. His thick fingers momentarily caressed her grooved, solid breast. Well now, hermits, he coughed. I seem to have interrupted a special meal. Even hermits must eat, Ernest countered. He grabbed up the last piece of chicken, a burnt neck, before the monk could help himself. The cleric contented himself with a few large crumbs of bread, and cheese still visible on the cloth. A mammoth man whose thick body overstuffed his woolen robe, he seemed to overshadow even the largest monuments scattered about him. Ernest eyed him carefully, hastily securing the few remaining pennies hidden in the clumps of dirt. The monk found several before Ernest could retrieve them all. I have known many hermits since taking my vows, the monk said, casually eyeing the clouds while dropping crumbs into his cavernous mouth. His face, marked with long-dried symbols of the pox, glistened with sweat. I once knew a holy man who sat by a cave. He was a wealthy man who once had the finest furnishings, silk curtains, Flemish wool, German-dyed rugs. Yet one day he went out into the wilderness by a river. He squatted down and wrapped his arms around his legs, and there he remained unmoving, balancing on his 2 feet. His posterior never profaned the sacred ground upon which he set himself. His clothes slowly decayed. His hair grew wild. Animals were so taken they came to admire him. You saw this, Ernest interrupted with a belch. I heard about it, the monk amended. The hermit just sat there, naked as the day he was born, and stared at the ground. His knees grew stiff. His back bowed under the weight of his arduous, self-imposed task. At first, he just grew thin as he subsisted on grass and leaves that fell within reach. I suppose there were a few acorns. The animals brought him fruits and berries to sustain him in his hour of need. You heard about that too, I suppose, Ernest sniffed. His fame spread, Hildegard said firmly. People brought him food. One woman spent a day baking him the richest of torts. He did not touch the cake, but ate the doily upon which it sat. I heard that the petrified cake was still untouched weeks later. In Hamburg, I saw bits of the cake being sold as relics. No doubt by bakers who advertised it as freshly baked, Ernest glibly interjected. The monk glared at him, then continued while Nostradamus listened intently. Soon the hermit was covered with ants and flies, yet he did not scratch. He grew old with taut muscles that had frozen stiff from such ill use. Yet he sat on his haunches and stared. Gray hair covered his face, lines started beside his eyes and descended slowly past his mouth. Excrement lay about him. Several old nuns cleaned him occasionally. I am told they simply laid him on his side like an old chair and poured water across him. He never spoke, he never moved. He was so thin people swear they could see through him. People said he did not vary his posture for years. Why would anyone do that? Nostradamus wondered aloud. Hildegard shrugged. I do not know, my son. Some people said he was talking to God. Some said the hermit was hoping that God would find him. Some said he had a vision of Jesus and was so stunned he realized the error his ways and was so fearful of damnation that he assumed this penitent pose. Others predicted that the day he moved, the world would end. As far as I know, he is still there, hunched and frozen. Ernest sucked loudly on the chicken bone marrow with particular vulgarity. The monk pretended not to notice. But he is not the only hermit I ever met or heard about. There was a man who climbed a small hill in the desert, stood on one leg and moved his other leg in a pumping motion for years. People used to come and watch him. There were others who mortified their flesh with thorns, so to better imitate the one who died for our sins. I have heard of hermits who have lived alone in caves, who ate their own excrement as atonement for their sins, or one who supped on one meal a week, and that just pulse, that simple porridge. I have heard of hermits who isolated themselves in the desert, living in silence from dawn through dusk, and eating what little they found carried to them by birds in the silence of the night. Early Adamites such as these helped initiate the monastic order for which I am a part. A large part. Observed Ernest, who was now lying on his back staring at the sky. His hands were folded contentedly across his chest, and he was breathing in a relaxed, easy manner as if preparing to fall asleep. Hildegard sidestepped the jibe. I am sure there are hermits none have ever seen or heard of, true masters of their craft, who purge themselves daily with whips, and who take upon the awful sins of the world that their brothers and sisters may not suffer eternal damnation. He sighed longingly and gave a wry smile at Nostradamus, who was virtually mesmerized by his smooth tones. I can say I must have seen or heard of 100 hermits in my time, the monk said. And, his voice stiffened, rising in indignation as his face reddened, I can safely say I never saw two together, or living in some pagan Roman ruins and chasing innocent pilgrims away, or eating such food as would give King Francis indigestion. I never saw any dressed as you, as indolent and insolent as you. I have never seen a hermit the likes of either of you. Now you have, Ernest yawned. Begone and spread our story with your other lies. It's a wonder you haven't picked up a lute and learned to strum so you might accompany yourself as you spin your tales. Infidel, Hildegard thundered. He struggled to get to his feet but gave up. I should denounce you to the Inquisition, and what if we were in Spain? If we were in Spain, Ernest continued, you would have denounced us before we ate so you could snare the meal. You are much too late, so cease your bellowing. Ernest reached into his filthy tunic and removed a small pie nestling on his stomach. I was saving this bit of shepherd's pie, but you may have it, provided you let it stop your flow of words. God will damn you, Hildegard muttered, but took the offering just the same. My mother made this dish for me. He stuffed it whole into his mouth, which opened as though hinged like that of a serpent. Your mother, Ernest sniffed. That old woman has to be more frozen than any of your stories by this time. The monk sat up. This was my food you helped yourself to, Hildegard said sternly. I was just preparing the table with my noon meal when the pilgrims came along. I had traveled far and deserved this simple repast to speed me on my way. I have never grown accustomed to the fare at the monastery and long have preferred to have my mother prepare my own, despite the effort it causes her. I have not ever shirked my vows. Or ever dropped your fork, Ernest noted. God has granted me sustenance that I may achieve such deserved prominence, the monk objected, finally rising to his feet and beginning to pace. Who am I to protest against his will? I do not resist God's willingness to fill my table, but take it as evidence of his divine beneficence and proof that he supports my actions. Nostradamus was surprised at how graceful the monk moved, despite his bulk. His ample stomach, which extended over his legs like a large turnip, made him appear lopsided, and yet he strode with agility and ease. His towering frame made him appear almost awesome, a Goliath among mortal men. I had just set out the meal God has provided when the pilgrims wandered by. They were singing so sweetly that I moved aside that I not disturb them and so incur the ire of angels, Hildegard explained. So I could listen and not interfere, I hid myself behind the old house there. I was only too willing to share my bread with such honest travelers who had taken up the cross for the Holy Land. Oh, what I would not give to see the ground Jesus trod. I would help recover Constantinople and Jerusalem from the Turks if I hadn't hurt my knee a week back while praying on hard ground. What about before that? Ernest asked, unmoved by anything he had heard. Before what? The monk asked. Before you hurt your knee. Couldn't you have faced down the Turks a month ago, 2 months ago, a year ago? Ernest eyed the monk. 100 pounds ago, Hildegard shook a fist at him. My old bones could still make a dozen Turks suffer before I won my martyrdom, but Pope Leo bade me be a witness, his eyes, and travel about the fair land of Christendom. I have been to Albion and visited with Great Harry himself. I journeyed to the frozen north where brave Swedes testify to Christ in open chapels, even as their breaths freeze cold in the endless chill and fall to pieces on the hard ground. I stayed until spring when the words finally thawed and floated upwards to the heavens. Wow, Nostradamus marveled. The monk, aware of his appreciative audience, pirouetted and, moving like a ballet dancer, waved his arms to augment his picture. I saw the Teutonic knights on their high steeds, all clad in armor, ride off into the pagan darkness on an heroic race, a holy pogrom for Christ among the heathens. I saw Jews who gathered among the true believers and let themselves slowly be dipped in the river Jordan. I thought, Ernest interrupted, the Blue Rhine, Hildegard immediately corrected himself. there to be uplifted into Christ's arms. I swear I saw a dove slowly circle among those finally willing to hear Christ's words. It seemed to speak to them, to welcome them into the kingdom of heaven. I saw so much more I cannot relate, and all of it I have told the Holy Father. The monk took a deep breath. I shall tell of him too, of the two sinners I found at Les Baux. Do not try to forestall me, I must. It is my sworn duty. He patted his stomach. Have you any more pie? I fear my strength shall fail me without sustenance. Pray to Christ for some, or to Leo, Ernest suggested. Nostradamus gasped at the impiety. Fear not, my son, Hildegard consoled the boy. He will spend his eternity in hell, regretting his thoughtless words and ill-lived life as he roasts amid the fires of the damned. Nonsense, Ernest drawled. He began to pick his teeth with his fingernails. There is no hell. It was made up by some pope fearful of losing his velvet robe and silk underclothes. The monk fell to his knees, clasped his hands together, and looked up to the heavens. Dear Lord, do not strike this sinner dead. He is a troubled soul in need of comfort. I know you must have sent me here to comfort him, to guide him back to the path of righteousness. He laboriously rose to his feet again. My son, think of your future, he soothed. There is no future, Ernest said. There is no past. There is only now. He patted his stomach. There is this and my purse. Nothing else matters. Ernest glanced over at Nostradamus and laughed. Confused, he bubbled. I can understand. Your head has been so filled with pater nostras and Latin mishmash from the holy book that you cannot understand the truth. Truth, bellowed the monk in protest. You think you know the truth? You liar, you are talking snake in this Garden of Eden, you doubting Thomas among the true believers. Ernest abruptly got up and marched to the horse, nuzzling grass in the shadows of the arch. He brusquely opened a small bag on the horse's back and removed something. He came striding back. Do you know what this is? He asked darkly. It looked like a small, white piece of chalk. This is supposed to be the small finger of John the Baptist. He held it triumphantly. People worship this bit of trash, he said with disgust. They use this insignificant refuse from the past to see their way into the vacant future. Share this story with other book lovers before moving to Chapter 4, Episode 2.